Hello and welcome to Tea Time Theology. I'm Ivy.
I'm Taylor Wilkie.
And I'm Charlotte LaForest.
Thank you for being with us today. So, do you want just to explain to us a little bit about who you are before we jump on in?
Sure. I am an Episcopal priest as well as a trauma therapist. I run the Province 1 School for Deacons as the dean, helping those who are deacons in training think about how they are bringing the good news of the church out into the wider world, looking at healing on a community level through that work. And then I do work on healing individually in therapy and then also as a spiritual director.
And we are talking about Moana today, the classic Disney movie we all know and love. Taylor, had you ever seen this movie before I emailed you saying that this was what we were going to do?
I had
Are
not.
you forever changed now that you
Are,
have?
This is what. Okay, so in my mind, like Moana has just come out. Like in my brain,
Yeah.
like Moana is a brand new Disney movie, and I was shook that it came out in 2016.
10 years old.
10 years ago.
I don't know what happened to time because this
Well,
just
COVID happened to time. It's
Yeah,
what
COVID.
happened.
Happened to time.
You know,
There's just like a big time warp in the middle of the decade since it was released.
yeah, so it was shocking to me when I looked up the coming attractions on the Blu-ray that I borrowed from the library, and it was stuff like live action Beauty and the Beast, Cars, like Cars 1 was like coming soon, Cars. I'm like, I thought Moana,
Early 2000.
I don't know. It showed me Cars. I don't know.
Maybe it was a re-release. Or Cars like they're on like what, Cars 4 now?
Something. But you know what? So that movie came out a decade ago, but the live action one is coming out this year. And
Yes.
so we are like super relevant again.
Live
So
action
we're not-
Cars, can't wait.
No, Moana.
So a live action Cars would be kind of funny because it would kind of be like the live action Lion King.
It's like
And how it
live
was like-
action in air quotes.
Yeah,
It
We're an
would be
audio
like
audience, audio.
Herbie, sort of, you know.
Oh my God, we'd be on like the F1 track. Brad Pitt would be there just because he's like the F1 guy now, apparently.
Yeah.
For those who don't know what Moana is about, it's about a young girl who goes on this journey to save her people and save her island. And I want to start with you, Charlotte. What is it about this movie that made you want to talk about it?
So when someone asks me what my favorite movie is, and I answer them Moana, they say, "Oh yeah, that's a great kids movie. I love that too. But what's your favorite movie?" And I'm like, Moana. It really holds that place of all-time favorite movie. And there is a real reason for it. Not only do I love the themes and the things that we are going to talk about today, but that movie was released onto streaming just before my twins were born. And I brought them home from the hospital, and I also had a 3-year-old, and we needed something that, would keep him engaged while we were trying to manage all the babies. And I put on Moana for him one day, and I had seen it once on streaming, but he loved it. And then it just like connected with me. And I discovered that in that time of stress with, 2 new babies and a 3-year-old and just all kinds of change, that Moana made me happy every time I watched it. And so there was a good stretch where we watched it every single day. And there were some really hard days that we watched it twice. And there may have even been a 3 Moana day when things were really dicey. But I know every word of the movie. I know every word of every song, every line of dialogue. It just took up a place in my heart. And then a couple months into that season, my grandmother had a stroke. And she and I were very, very close. She was, you know, someone who saw me and knew me and understood me. So Moana's connection with her grandmother, and spoiler alert, the grandmother's death in the movie, and the way that that formed her when my grandmother did eventually die about 8 months later. Again, it was kind of that story and the music from that movie. I remember, like, I was driving to celebrate, you know, preach, celebrate the Eucharist, bury her, and was singing the Moana music the whole way there. So it just gets to me on a bunch of levels, you know, in terms of emotion and connections with stages in my life. But then it sort of lives at this intersection of all of my different professional interests too. So, Ivy, when you first reached out to me and I said that I would talk about Moana, you mentioned, like, oh, your mom had said I had talked about Moana. My new connection to Moana is that she got me a job.
Yeah.
Because when I interviewed for the Deacon School dean position, one of the questions was, you know, how do you talk about, or where do you see the work of the deacon in some form of media? And my mind went totally blank because I didn't have the questions in advance. And I was like, well, there's one movie that I know better than any other movie, and I'm sure I can get somewhere. And so I started talking about Moana and how, you know, there's the people of the island who need to go further out into the world, but no one will do it. And so she, the deacon Moana, leads the way, and she goes and she has this whole journey of discovery, and she connects the people to their origin story. And then she comes back and she takes them out to go experience wayfinding and being on the waves. And I got really animated. And multiple people from that interview told me that it was Moana that got me that job. So thanks, girl. I appreciate it.
I love when people are able to get jobs because they show
Of Disney characters. Yeah.
When we did our bishop walkabouts, my mom was like on the committee that was helping format the questions, and I was in high school, and I jokingly told her that the question that should be on the bishop's walkabouts was who their favorite Disney princess was. That was voted down, obviously. We asked favorite hymn, but I definitely believe that you learn a lot about people based on like Disney characters that they love.
Mhm.
Oh,
Or like
absolutely.
characters.
All right, so I gotta know, who are yours?
Who are-
Put you on the spot.
I will say big Beauty and the Beast fan. Love that movie so much. But I will say that I cry every time I watch Encanto. Like that ending, the grandmother song, it just always hits me.
The
Especially-
miracle is you.
Yes, I'm like sobbing. Doesn't matter what's happening. What about you, Taylor?
I would have to say, because I'm a millennial, I grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s. My Disney choices were very limited because I'm a boy.
What? You had Monsters Inc?
No, that
No,
was
that was later.
That's way
yeah.
later. Like I
I'm
had
a millennial
Aladdin.
too, elder millennial.
Yeah.
So
Like
you
I
know,
had
you
Aladdin.
got
That
not
was
to-
it.
Oh,
Aladdin
wow.
was it. Maybe Lion King, but I never really vibed with Simba.
Yeah.
Maybe
right, because it was big, like Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid,
Oh
and
yeah, Pocahontas.
Mhm.
I went to
Mhm.
Disney as a child right when Pocahontas came out. And I know that because Disney was full of Pocahontas everything at the time. That's what I remember. I was on like some kind of weird like train ride through the woods, and they were playing Colors of the Wind throughout the entire ride because it was brand new. It just come out.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So Aladdin, I think Aladdin would be kind of my vibe, I think. Or maybe Rex. Rex from Toy Story.
Yes, I see that for you. I see
Yeah,
that.
I like it.
Did you do Bugs Life? Or was that later?
I was an
90s.
ants person.
Oh, yeah, we talked about this, that you were an ants person.
Yeah.
All right. DreamWorks. That's DreamWorks, right?
I believe it is, yeah.
They have some good movies as well.
They do. They have Shrek, guys. Shrek's a whole religion.
Mhm.
So we can come back and we can do Shrek next season.
Yeah, we'll do Shrek one another time.
Love Shrek. All right, so let's jump right in to Moana. And let's start with talking about like her as a character. So a lot of her sort of inner turmoil sort of comes between this idea of duty versus calling. And sort of how do you see that play out in the Bible or in spiritual practices, especially within the Episcopal Church?
I really connected early on in my love for Moana with the idea of this call moment she has. She's a baby and she toddles toward the water, and the water comes to her, delivers the heart of Te Fiti. It has this profound and beautiful moment that we learn later her grandmother witnessed. And Moana, for years until her grandmother said that to her, thought that it was a dream. And to me, I mean, from the first time I saw it, that felt like a baptismal moment. A moment where it has the water themes and the gift and the celebration of who Moana was. You know, the water's playfully twisting up her hair and then sort of gently taking her back to shore. And she has that moment and then is immediately rushed into this song where her father in particular is singing about their island and everything that makes it wonderful, and you know the things that they do, but there's this heartbeat throughout the song of but we never leave, right? We have everything we need here, and so we never leave. And Moana, you know, she grows up through that song. You see her at different ages as the song goes along. And she always has this connection looking back to the water, wanting to go back to the water, and they're pulling her into the life of the island. And, you know, when I think about baptism as something that happens for an individual, you know, yes, we make baptismal covenants and commitments as a community, but baptism is also something that happens to an individual person. And, you know, when I work with families or individuals to prepare them for baptism, the thing that I always tell them is, you know, God doesn't start loving you the minute that I dribble water on your head, right? This is a public celebration of God's love for you that is very specific to you and the gifts and talents and passions that you as an individual have. And the community supports you in that and celebrates who you are. And so for Moana, there's this contrast. And I think as much as we would love to think that that in no way reflects the church, we know that it does. That there are people for a whole host of reasons who are made to feel as though their identity or gifts or passions do not mesh with the church as an institution. And, you know, I do a lot of work with religious and spiritual trauma, and where you see some of those circumstances are in that clash, right? Often of, you know, deeply faithful individuals who want to be a part of their church or their other kind of religious community, but are told that there is something about them that makes them unworthy or not good enough to be fully a member of the community. And so they need to change and shape themselves to be welcome. And that is, I think, a loss for the church. And I think Moana shows, you know, another path of really settling into who you are and living into that call that God has given each individual.
Have you ever heard the phrase, you can't be a prophet in your hometown? I feel like I hear that a lot. And I was just wondering, based off, I'm sorry, this wasn't on the preset notes, but just based off of what you were saying and thinking through like that sort of idea as well of like, do you think part of the reason that was so hard for her to sort of have her father listen to her at the beginning is that idea of like, you can't be a prophet in your hometown?
I mean, absolutely, that's a factor. You know, that's Jesus that says that in the Bible. He goes back to Nazareth, and people are like, you're Joseph's kid. What are you talking about? Like, we knew you when you were in Pampers. And, you know, it is absolutely hard, you know, to speak wisdom and truth with people who have known you through all your best and worst chapters of your life. And for Moana, she is in this position of leadership. She's the daughter of the chief. She's training to take over as the next chief. And so I think there's this extra twist that not only, do they see her as a young girl, who is she to be the one to fix and save everything, but also, there is this clarity of like, no, this is your path and you don't have a choice. And she steps away from that.
So Moana often acts on belief without proof. And just sort of want to get your perspective on that sort of idea, as well as how that shows faith in something bigger, like destiny, ancestors, or calling.
For me, and as Moana, she uses this phrase a lot, like, I go back to the water. And that's where her call is, and her belief that there is more out there, that there is more to be discovered. And then as the island starts dying and they're losing coconut trees and their fisheries are drying up, and she believes that venturing out, she has this just strong conviction that there is more, and she believes that. And, in the scriptures and in the life of our church, water can be a symbol of the Holy Spirit. And so that imagery there of the presence of the Spirit kind of calling her to something, it's very much an act of faith. And that is true in so many of our lives when we feel a sense of call or a pull towards something in particular, and we may not have data or facts to back up why it is the right thing to do, but there is that sense of urging in that call to continue onward. And so she takes that risk, and she does have, as you named, kind of the encouragement of her ancestors. She is deeply connected, as I named earlier, to her grandmother. Her grandmother is the one who tells her the stories and reveals to her the truth of her ancestors, who were voyagers up until Maui stole the heart of Te Fiti and this darkness started spreading through. And at one point later in the movie, Maui says something about how it had been almost 1,000 years since he stole the heart of Te Fiti and was trapped on the island where Moana eventually finds him. And so that's a long distillation of, this generational trauma of it's not safe out there. It's not safe. And then you have her grandmother, who is, we don't know if she's the very first, but she is a disruptor of that. She likes what she likes. She loves the water. And that has a cost to her. She says, I'm the village crazy lady. That's how people see her, because she's going against the way we've always done things here, which of course was not always the way they'd done things, but it was far enough back. And so her connection with her grandmother encourages her to step into something new and something different and try going about things a different way.
Wouldn't she have been in charge of the tribe for a while, though?
The mother? The grandmother?
Yeah, wasn't she the chief's mother?
Yes, but there's no evidence that Tala is her name. There's not necessarily evidence in this story that she ran the tribe. It was perhaps her husband, okay, Moana's grandfather.
I would also say I feel like in the context of this story, she to me functions more as like a John the Baptist carrier, if Moana is then the Jesus character. She's really there to sort of set the stage and get things ready for them, Moana, to be able to go out and actually do the thing.
Yeah, she absolutely is a catalyst, and she sets things in motion, and she sends Moana.
And I do also think it's interesting talking about this like generational trauma, that her father at one point also loved the water, and then he had that traumatic moment with it, and that even brought it more, so it wasn't just like the tribe or a cultural thing. It was, he also was like, I lost someone to this and I won't lose you as well.
Right. And you see there, this interaction of generational and individual trauma, right? Where Tui, the dad's name, I told you I know this movie. Tui, you know, also had this passion for going out into the water, and you get a flashback of that as the grandmother's telling the story, and he wanted to go beyond. He felt that same call that Moana feels, but then he had this individual traumatic experience, and his friend died in the waves. And when you have something like that happen, it clenches down on a trauma narrative. It gives both the individual and the community the ability to say, see, I was right. See, it's not safe out there. You shouldn't go out there. And then you see kind of a new level added to the generational trauma, where, you know, it's been almost 1,000 years. Had that not happened to Tui individually, maybe he might have been open to letting Moana try, but it like turned the dial right back up. And when I work with individuals in trauma healing, I mean, that's what we talk about is, you know, these trauma narratives form early in our lives, and then we, you know, have these experiences, big and small, that reinforce them. See, I was right. I knew I wasn't safe. I knew I wasn't good enough. And that reinforces, and then something later reinforces, and all of that. And so you see that in Tui's character.
Thinking about Moana and her relationship with her grandmother, it also is sort of like a mentorship relationship as well. And I feel like that's something that I've heard a lot of priests talk about when they come on this podcast and talk about sort of their journey to the priesthood and all that kind of stuff. They talk about like a mentor they have. And as someone who's a therapist, but also an educator, what do you sort of see in that sort of like holiness of mentorship?
The authenticity and the vulnerability that is able to happen in one-to-one mentoring relationships, where the mentor is sharing of themselves and of their lives and helping the protege be able to understand new truths about themselves and to explore and discover things. I think that, you know, the language that I've used for it in thinking about Moana and her grandmother is someone who really sees her, sees who she is, and uplifts that and encourages her. And certainly, you know, you name talking with priests and bishops and deacons who have come on the podcast, you know, often there is someone who said it to that clergy person before they ever could even say it about themselves. You know, have you ever thought about being ordained? Have you ever thought about that? And of course, that doesn't just happen in ministry, but certainly that is our familiar shared context. And Tala does that for Moana. She, you know, is the one who tells her the story of the day that she found the heart of Te Fiti by the ocean, or the ocean gave it to her when she was a little girl. She gives it back to her. She says, "You're ready. This is your time. Let's go," and sends her out. So I think she embodies both that direct mentor as well as a connection to the ancestors. And she's the one that shows her the cave full of boats that the ancestors used. Remarkably good condition for those boats for having been there for almost 1,000 years. But, you know, they didn't ask me for that detail. I think that role, you know, not just biological ancestors, but the stories and the lives of the saints, those who have been officially canonized and those who haven't, but those foremothers and fathers of faith who have taken their own journeys in the past, and their stories, even though they aren't that kind of individual mentoring relationship, offer inspiration and insight and hope. They're these very real people with, you know, real struggles, and they help us as ourselves real people to imagine that perhaps, you know, we could be faithful and that we could be holy too.
Thinking about this generational trauma and collective trauma, what do you see sort of is the impact of cultural or generational trauma on identity and purpose?
In Moana or in real life?
Oh,
Okay, let's start with Moana. Having watched this movie a couple of times, a couple hundred of times. There is kind of a direct story of the transmission of trauma that you get pieced together throughout the movie. That it starts with Maui and his parents, and you don't learn this until much later in the movie. You learn that for whatever reason, and no reason is given in the movie, that his parents didn't want him. And so they threw him into the ocean. Pretty awful, pretty violent image. And he has a tattoo of it on his back. He has these magical tattoos that appear from different formative experiences. I mean, you talk about someone wearing their heart on their sleeve or like bearing their scars. Like, he has all of these different images of battles he's fought, trauma that he's endured. They just show up visibly on his body. So we learn later on that he was thrown into the ocean by his parents. The ocean, who again has this kind of magical Holy Spirit power to her, brought him to the gods. The gods gave him a magical fish hook, and he went out, and we learned that he spent his whole life trying to be loved. He did all kinds of amazing things for humans. He would pull up islands, he would give them coconuts. I mean, in his Lin-Manuel Miranda You're Welcome song, you know, he lists off all of these things that he did. He defeated monsters and he gave them all these gifts, and it was never enough for them. So you have this guy who, you know, is an infant who's told that he's not good enough, he's not worthy, chucked into the ocean. Then each time he does something to try to be loved by the people, they're like, cool, and can we have some more? Right? And ultimately, he goes out to try to steal the heart of Te Fiti, who had this goodness. I mean, she is very much a creator spirit. Get the whole Trinity in the movie, though they're not, you know, as tightly knit together in that way, but she, you know, is the goddess of life, and she makes islands and she makes all of this goodness in the world. And he goes to try to take her heart as a gift for humans. Right? Now, he's not necessarily doing this in an attempt to inflict violence upon Te Fiti, but of course he is. And everything starts to fall apart. The trauma that she has experienced, I mean, her heart being stolen, there's a whole lot of levels of the trauma that she experiences and the way that is explored in the movie. But the impact of that event, you know, Maui is kicked to an island and loses his fish hook. And then the sadness and the trauma and the rage of what turns from Te Fiti into Te Kā spreads out to impact Moana's people, which then makes its way all the way down to her as an individual. And, you know, the whole community is impacted by trauma that started with one child, and you have thousands of years of people and whole communities impacted. And so it is this tightly woven story about how that happens within this particular community. But we see that same dynamic in the real world too. People who have experienced trauma and who have not had the care and resources that they need to know what to do with it. They haven't been able to speak of it. They don't know what to do with the intense dysregulation that they have in their own nervous systems from the trauma that they've endured. Then they go out into the world, and the way that they interact with others is shaped by the trauma that they have experienced, and it just spreads outward. And then again, you have this intermingling of individual and community trauma. So you have the individual pathways passed through families, and then you have traumas that impact a community level. So things like racism, things like poverty, things like, you know, all types of community violence. And all of those just kind of spin together in this web of trauma that can impact people and communities in some hugely profound ways.
And let's talk a little bit more about Maui, specifically about like his redemption arc and his own interaction with self-worth, because we meet him and he sort of puts on this very like brave face of like, oh, I'm amazing, and then you find out he's like, oh no, he doesn't think he's amazing, even though he is. And sort of what does that sort of look like in a faith tradition?
Yeah, I mean, Maui, he starts out with this song that is all about how wonderful he is and the thing that he's done. I mean, to put that in kind of trauma therapy terms, we would call it masking, right? He puts on this brave face, this bravado of look at all the things that is, hiding this enormous amount of pain that he's experienced. And there's a point early on in the movie where he's trying to get his hook back and they have to go to the realm of monsters, and Moana's a little bit afraid of this, and she's like, maybe we don't need it. And he says, without my hook, I am nothing. And he leaves because it was damaged. They get it back. It was damaged. He's like, I'm nothing without my hook, because his hook was what gave him his magical ability. And then later, after they are preparing to actually face Taka at the end of the movie, it's sort of set up that if he hits Taka with the hook one more time, it will be ruined. And Moana says to him, Maui, what about your hook? And he says, hook or no hook, I'm Maui. We see through this experience, he has this progression from like, I'm only valued in what I can do for other people to, I am my full self. And I really believe that that comes through his relationship with Moana, through their friendship and through her appreciation for him exactly as he is. She sees him the way that her grandmother saw her. And it shows how healing can be just as widespread as trauma in those individual relationships as we give that gift to one another and continue to pass that along. And so that itself is a model of, what a church community could be, of being in community and, sharing with one another and seeing one another. And that's very much rooted in the person of Jesus. I mean, Jesus was incredibly, real and connected. Jesus saw the people that he interacted with in the Gospels in ways that other people did not. And, the very best of what the church could be is exactly that. And there's a risk involved because getting to that point requires vulnerability. And the way that our churches are structured, there's not always room for that. In an ideal world, the church is the place that we all show up as messes, to all be messes together and to remember that we are deeply loved, and to be changed and formed by that. A lot of times we feel like we have to put on our Sunday best and we have to perform and we have to mask. And so you get more often, a church full of Maui at the beginning of the movie. And I think that that goes for church members as well as clergy. Clergy are very much taught and programmed to sort of connect their worth and their value to the church based on what it is that they can do, external measures of success and all of those things. And so there is an enormous amount of pressure that clergy face to perform. And if that is not something that they're able to do, then, there are consequences, and there is an enormous amount of trauma that clergy themselves experience. That's, another area of my work that I have a lot of passion about, is working with clergy themselves who have experienced trauma before their ministry, during their ministry, those who have left from ministry, all of those things. Those are real opportunities for healing and vulnerability, if there are spaces for that.
Now I'm like, I want to go listen to you on a Sunday morning. These are like nice, succinct. I have a feeling you don't ramble for 30 minutes.
You
Okay.
can share my Substack if you want, and I just posted a sermon and a video. I had a lot of fun this past Sunday, like getting kind of grouchy about how Eve has been viewed in the Christian tradition. It's kind of a fun ride, so.
We'll link your Substack in the comments in the body. Taylor will figure out how to do that.
Yeah,
Perfect.
sure. We'll definitely be doing that.
Think But anyways,
We
I
never
think
put
there's a
anything in the description, ever.
that's more because we're bad at it, not because it's not thoughtful. Let's talk a little bit about Taka and Tafiti, sort of like the monster, but they're not a monster. There's a couple ways we can sort of look at this. First is, and you did kind of touch on this, but how does this speak to trauma manifesting as pain or defensiveness?
Taka's role in the story, I mean, there is a bit of mirroring between Maui's story and hers. The way Maui was rejected leads to harm that he did in other ways. Similarly, Taka's story of how she was impacted, spread out into the harm done to others. Her story, for me, picks up on themes of violence against women and seeing sort of this part of her body used for another, a man's purpose. And, we know his reasons and whatnot, her rage that comes out of it. I mean, she fully embodies it. She turns from this verdant goddess, one of my spiritual godmothers, Hildegard of Bingen, like, she's full of viriditas, right? She is viriditas embodied. And then she suffers this loss and she turns into a lava monster. She just is fueled by rage. And so that's how she lives in the world for, as far as we know, 1,000 years. She is, unable to leave this sort of reef area because she can't go in the water. I mean, she is isolated in her pain. Her pain is just kind of spewing out into the water and impacting everything around it. And as far as we know, up until the point in the movie, like, she would exist like that for all of time until Moana sees her. Just as Moana sees Maui in something different, Moana, because she herself has been seen for more than what she looks like on the surface, she notices, she sees that Taka has this swirl on her body that matches the heart of Tafiti. This scene in the movie brings tears to my eyes every time because Moana is holding the heart of Tafiti. We're supposed to be terrified of this lava monster. And Moana turns to her. She parts the seas. I mean, now you get like Moses in the Red Sea kind of vibes too. She asks the ocean to part and she starts walking on the ocean. She holds up the heart and says, "Let her come to me." And Taka like crawls at her in this terrified rage. And Moana sings this song. "I have crossed the horizon to find you. I know your name. They have stolen the heart from inside you, but this does not define you. I told you I know every word. This is not who you are. You know who you are." And she reminds her of who she is. And Taka draws near to Moana, and she's still Taka at this moment. She's a lava monster, and they press their foreheads together. Moana's not afraid to get close to her right in her pain. She doesn't only get close to her when she's Tafiti. She gets close to her right in her pain and her rage, and then she reaches out and restores her heart. And then everything changes, and she returns to the goddess, the viriditas, the life, the energy, the kindness, where, she bestows gifts even eventually on Maui, who has harmed her. But she gives him like the best look in all of animation when he's like, "Tafiti, hey," like he tries to bluster, and she gives him this look like, yeah, you again. But she gives him back his hook. She's not holding that grudge. And she is restored and she makes possible restoration for him and for Moana. She gives her back her boat, sends her on her way. And then she takes a freaking nap. That's another thing I love about Tafiti, right? Is that she has just been through this whole like millennium of, trauma and rage. And so she turns back into Tafiti. She gives a couple gifts and then she curls up and she takes a nap as the island once more. And, I could go off nerding about like polyvagal theory and how that's a polyvagal crash that she experiences after her traumatic experience. But I mean, really just the beauty of she's caring for herself. She gives a couple of gifts, but she doesn't start, handing out, you get one and you get one and you get one to all of creation again. She lets herself be restored. There's some real like rest is resistance, Trisha Hersey and the Nap Ministry kind of energy to that moment. And then Moana and Maui go on. Moana goes back to her island. She tells her people what she's seen, right? This is, classic Jesus and the apostles, like go out and then come back and tell me. So she's gone out, she comes back and she tells the people and then she takes them out. That's the deacon in her, right? She takes them out onto the ocean and teaches them to sail and to explore the way that the ancestors did. And it's pretty remarkable.
Yes, I don't know if you guys get if the algorithm shows you this meme as well, but I get the one of like, this is your gentle reminder that the Bible with Elijah, God was like, I'm so mad I want to die. And God said, here's some food. Why don't you have a nap? So Elijah slept and ate and decided things weren't so bad. I love that one.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Like, what can't a nap and a snack fix? I mean, God knew.
We all just like need
God invented toddlers. God knew.
I don't always like my algorithm, but sometimes the right thing comes through.
Mm-hmm.
So the last sort of section I have is about faith in dark moments. And we see that a lot in this story where Moana is ready to give up, to go home. What helps her find her way back to purpose, but also specifically like the grandmother being like, it's okay too. You can be tired and go home as well.
In that moment, I mean, she is not only recalled to her grandmother's ability to see her for who she is, right? And in reminding her that it's okay to go home, she's reminding her that she is not only worthy because of what she accomplishes, that she is worthy and, worthy of love just for who she is. Ultimately, it is being seen by her grandmother in that way that she kind of has this restored energy and passion. It's where she gets like worked up to her big, like, I am Moana moment, was in her grandmother reminding her of who she is. And I think in those moments, I mean, we all have them. St. John of the Cross writing about the dark night of the soul. It's not realistic to think that human existence or a life of faith is going to take place without obstacles and challenges. But it's all about, what happens in those moments. And John of the Cross writes about how in our dark night of the soul, so often we're afraid of darkness, but actually so much of our growth happens in the darkness. And he talks about, the darkness as a place of encounter, for the soul and Christ as lovers, and picking up on imagery from the Song of Solomon, and that there is, there's so much good that happens at night that we don't have to be afraid of it, that there is something that is happening even in those moments, even if we're not in the happy clappy stage of our faith. And so to be able to know, first of all, that that's okay, right? She has that blessing from her grandmother, but then also, she has her grandmother just as an example too. And again, we get the stories of the saints, the stories of those who have gone on before us. That's why I love the history of saints that we have, not because they were these like paragons of virtue all the time. Like, I love a grouchy saint. I love a saint who, isn't sure. Reading Dorothy Day is one of my favorites of a 20th century. She did these amazing things in founding the Catholic worker movement and bringing the homeless poor to live with her. And when you read her diaries, there's like, why are all these people in my house all the time? And there's not enough food and it's never quiet. And she continues on. I love that as we've gotten further away from only writing hagiographies for saints, these stories of devotion and heroism that had their role as a literary form during the medieval era. But as we've gotten to the modern era, we get to have whole stories and grouchy saints. And I think that that is really important for the moments when we're not sure if we can carry on, if we're not sure if we're good enough, if we're too wounded, if we, don't have what it takes. Stories that show us that we don't have to have it all figured out. We just need to keep taking steps forward in faith. And those are the things that encourage us to keep going, even if we're not sure exactly where we're going.
Since you are the Moana expert, is there anything else you wanted to talk about or touch on that we didn't bring up?
I mean, just how awesome Tamatoa is. Jermaine Clement as a talking, singing crab. That character was inspired by his David Bowie impression on Flight of the Conchords. And, he has his own little narrative of, he says, I was a drab little crab once, right? Like, he was nothing special. And so he needed to prove how special he was. And we don't necessarily see a redemption arc or a healing arc from him yet. Because he has taken Maui's hook and he wants their attention. There's a lot I could say about kind of, the narcissistic wound that makes someone to act that way. And even at the end of the movie, the post-credits scene in Moana is him. He got flipped over on his back when Moana and Maui escaped, and he's still on his back. And, at the very end after they escape, he's like, did you like the song? And then the post credits, like, he's still, wanting their attention and wondering if they're listening and admiring him. So there's hope for him yet.
And Flight of the Conchords is coming back.
Is it really?
Oh, yeah. For some reason, my Spotify, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Flight of the Conchords was in, like, my daily mixes. And I'm like, what's going on? I haven't heard a Flight of the Conchords song in, like, a decade. And I looked it up, and yeah, they just made a Netflix deal, and they're making a new film.
Amazing.
Also, I just want to say, good on Moana for early in the movie. They are a coconut and fish-based economy, and on Moana's first day, all of that died.
I know, right?
Like, what a bad first day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. This has nothing to do with Moana, but since you talked about Hildegard, who I also love, I just wanted to make sure you knew of the musical In the Green.
I have not seen that. Oh, I don't have my poster with me. But I went this January to the premiere of an opera about Hildegard in New York that was just incredible. I write about that on my Substack. I will send it to you.
Yeah, please do. And definitely In the Green, the whole album is on Spotify. So definitely listen to that one too if you're a Hildegard fan. And since you've plugged your Substack twice, if we want to connect with you, how would we do that? What is your name on? I don't understand how Substack works. So, like, how do you connect with people on there?
Yeah, it's A Fierce Hope is the name of my publication, and it's just my name, Charlotte LaForest. It is where I put a lot of my writing out, since I'm not in a parish right now on a regular basis. So sometimes I'll share sermons there or other writing that I'm doing. Go check it out.
And is there any other ways that people can connect with you?
You can reach out to me through the Province One School for Deacons. My info is on the Province One page of the Episcopal Church, as well as through my therapy practice, which is Thrive and Grow Psychotherapy in South Windsor, Connecticut. And is a really wonderful collaborative practice with a focus on trauma and EMDR, which is a particular form of trauma treatment.
Thank you for chatting with us about Moana today.
Thanks for the invitation. I loved it. I'm going there to see my father. I'm going there no more to roam. I'm only going over Jordan. I'm only going over home. I'm going there to see my Savior, to sing His praise forevermore. I'm only going over Jordan. I'm only going over home.
Thank you for listening to Tea Time Theology, a ministry of St. John's Cathedral in Rhode Island. We would like to thank our producers, Ivy Swinsky and Taylor Wilkie. Special thanks to Mario Akande and David Hines for this season's music. Additionally, we would like to thank our sponsor, the Episcopal Diocese of Rhode Island, and the Right Reverend Nicholas Knisley, as well as our guests today. Follow us at Tea Time Theology on all social medias.